right. Hi, everybody. It's good to see all of you on the call this morning. I'm Alex Bertolucci. I'm the Oregon Communications Manager for Circular Action Alliance. Today, we are talking about CAA's upcoming service provider portal. Thanks for everybody's flexibility with having to reschedule this webinar due to the Zoom outage at the exact time as our last scheduled webinar. This is one of two webinars on the topic that we have scheduled so far, and the second one will take place May 14th at 10 a.m. Pacific. And I'll drop a link into the chat for where folks can register for that next webinar. The service provider portal is for local governments, haulers, community-based organizations, and anyone else receiving money from CAA. So producers, if you're on the call today, we love that you're here and interested, but this will not be a portal that you will most likely be using, and we don't want people to get confused between the several portals that we will be launching. So I would invite you to drop off the call so that we don't create more confusion between everyone. Now, I am not a lawyer, nor am I your lawyer, and you can read this slide here for yourself. But the overview is that today's webinar is not legal advice, and you shouldn't use it as such. This shouldn't really be a problem today, but just in case we're covering our bases here. We've got a lot to cover today, including the service provider portal overview. We'll look at timelines and activity reporting, as well as invoicing and the ever-important reimbursement. Then we'll turn our attention to what you can do to prepare and a look at next steps. But before we get into the webinar, I always like to take a few minutes to remind folks who CAA is. While I am doing that, feel free to drop into the chat your name and the organization that you represent. So CAA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to implementing effective packaging extended producer responsibility, or EPR laws in the United States. And CAA was founded by the companies shown here. These founding members provide CAA with startup capital and continued oversight and governance. However, because CAA is the sole producer responsibility organization in many states, including here in Oregon, we're committed to working with the thousands of member producers obligated under EPR laws. And CAA's mission is to deliver harmonized, best-in-class compliance services to all producers to advance an efficient and effective circular economy. We will meet state regulations, build on existing systems and structures when possible, and work with interest holders across the system to advance environmental outcomes of covered products. In Oregon, we're also focused on ensuring that local governments, service providers, and community members have the tools, resources, and funding to successfully implement packaging EPR. Before I turn it over to Aaron, I want to remind everyone that the service provider portal is for haulers, local governments, community-based organizations, and other organizations that are receiving funding from CAA. This portal will not be used by producers. So again, I know some folks have joined in the last couple minutes. So to reduce confusion between the different portals, I invite any of our producer friends to drop off the call now. And now, before we turn it over to Aaron, if you do have questions, if you would please use the Q&A feature that you can find in your Zoom toolbar. It just helps us keep track of those questions a little easier than having to scroll up through the chat. So, Aaron, let's turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thanks for the introduction. My name is Aaron Berman. I lead the data and analytics team here at Circular Action Alliance, and so have been hard at work kind of defining a lot of the information and data and systems internally so that we can kind of accept information from folks and then also process that into reimbursements. So to start out, like what is the service provider portal? it's really kind of a, a platform that we're building out that will allow communities, service providers of all types. So those could be local governments, haulers, MRFs, brokers, who all can enter data into our system. So anything that is anything that's going to be used for tracking material. So we are trying to track material from basically the community that it starts in all the way through to a responsible end market. So we're going to be, getting lots of transactional information from folks to be able to accomplish that and to support the CRPFs with their obligations. You'll also be able to submit requests for transportation reimbursement, as well as any other, the invoices that'll come in. So that can be for any of the things that are out there that we have a contract addenda for. Each of the contract addenda, will tell you exactly what you need to submit along with your invoice or with your activity reports. You can also log in to check the status of your invoice or submit questions or issues to CA staff. Do you want to go to the next slide? Great. So we are working pretty hard to get this moving. So we've got the main thing from, I think, from everyone's perspective listening in is to work right now to get the primary funding agreement signed. So that is something that's released both for the primary funding agreement and each of the addenda are out in the world for folks to review and sign. Then next month, once we start getting more of these contracts in, there's certain information that's in the contracts for some baseline data that some of them require to send. And this is really something to help us understand, sort of like a bunch of information about, what's your current, volume that you're processing, what are the routes, sort of like the hauling transport runs that you're doing currently. Lots of information in there to get a sense for, what your activities as a service provider are. We'll have another one of these webinars where we'll be working to kind of present a little bit more of the information, a little bit more about the process, the detailed process of getting set up in the system. And we'll also be providing some support to CRPFs and some other service providers who will be responsible for submitting more frequent data, just to try to do a little bit of one-on-one coaching and understanding so that we can try to align systems to make all of this as easy as possible. In June, we'll start to onboard folks and do more training. We'll release a sort of a recorded webinar of the kind of the how to get things done in the portal. We'll also be doing in-person support at AOR. So if you're able to attend there, I think all of us on the webinar here will be, I think the panelists will all be there, along with a lot of other folks from the CAA Oregon team. And again, if you haven't submitted baseline data, it's best to do that, and so that we are ready to launch on July 1st. July 1st is when we would start receiving data, as well as potentially starting to receive invoices from folks. Next slide. So there's kind of two different ways that we're looking at submitting items to us for reimbursement. So there's what we call activity reports, and the activity reports are really going to be focused on material movement. So for transfer stations, MRFs, transportation reimbursement, glass collection, will all submit data to us through the portal. Other reimbursement types, you would just submit an invoice with backup documentation, which I'll talk about in a second. But for the activity reports, we are going to the contract addendum for the CRPFs, talks about getting daily upload of scale ticket information, both inbound and outbound. We would also ask for a monthly inventory summary report, so we understand sort of how much material is still, in bales waiting to be sent or on the tip floor and everything, so that we can understand sort of the how much, basically is the incoming matching what's going outbound. And then we'll talk more about this as I think some of the rules and things around REMS are in a little bit of flux right now, but we will want reports from the CRPFs of, kind of tracking their material to the end market. So if it goes through a broker, we'll have a broker report that either the CRPF can fill out or they can designate the broker to do that would then, show that the material, each, container of material made it to an end market, or each shipment of material made it to an end market. For haulers seeking, oh, no, sorry, go back to that slide. For haulers seeking the transportation reimbursement, it'll be a two-step process. And for those that would submit at the, likely at the beginning of the month, here are the likely loads that I'm going to be shipping out that I'll be requesting the transportation reimbursement for. As part of the contracting process, we are going to want the haulers to list all of the, sort of segments that they would run. So from this transfer station to this MRF, all of those kinds of things. What type of truck do they generally use? What material are they shipping? And then if it's, loose or, baled or anything like that. So basically at the beginning of the month, we'd want you to submit a request. Our system will check to see if that's one that's, sort of approved route, or if there's an issue with the approved routes, then we would have a exception process if, the MRF that you usually go to is at capacity or is for some reason not accepting material, we can approve one to be sent to the material to be sent to another one. So that's kind of the approval process. You'll get in essence, you'll upload a file that'll have all of your expected shipments. We'll send back transportation authorization numbers. And then when you submit the actual documentation of the shipments, that's when you'll include those transportation authorization numbers as well in there. For the most part, the other ones are, again, going to be kind of daily scale tickets information in a format that will kind of work with each of you on to make sure that your system can easily export information, or if you can, or have the ability to, sort of manually fill it out in a format that our system can read. All right, now next one. So for other types of contracts, basically all of the folks who are filling out activity reports will also put in an invoice. But then in addition, folks who are not doing activity reports because they're is not as concerned with material movement, then they would also just submit an invoice with any backup documentation. So you can see the invoices box on the right. The top three there are, the ones that we just talked about on the last screen. And then the rest of them are all ones that would just require an invoice and backup documentation. And so for those ones, you would submit an invoice either to our, AP invoicing email address, or you can log into the portal and upload the invoice there. You'd also be able to check the status of it and things like that. For the activity report based invoices, basically, the service providers will be submitting, daily information to us about, the movement of materials, or how much material is incoming and outgoing to their facilities. And then what we'll do at the end of the month is provide a summary of all of that information. And that monthly summary will be available in the portal. And that's what we'll want you to base the invoice on. So we'll want the invoice, the total tons and eligible tons and everything like that will be indicated in the monthly summary. And then the invoice that you send should match that. If there's any issues at that point, when you see the monthly summary, there's a process that we'll have for being able to go back and oh, it looks like we missed, certain scale tickets, or, these ones were entered incorrectly, things like that. And we would be able to update the system, update the monthly summary, and then you could submit the invoice. Next slide. So a little more just a flow chart of how this process will work. So basically, the service provider will be providing us, daily activity reports with each, scale transaction. It's definitely for the CRPFs. The transportation, reimbursement can be more on a monthly basis as you sort of see as you want to track them and submit invoices for them. But at the end of the month, we will create this monthly summary, and then that'll be available in the portal for you. You would be able to go and view that, make sure that your data that you have matches that, and then you'd be able to do the invoice calculations for each of the different contract addenda and submit the invoice. Our team will be comparing that monthly summary and the invoice, and we're going to want to make sure that those two things match exactly. If the tonnage on the invoice doesn't match the monthly summary, we'll reach out to try to understand what the difference is, and make sure that any corrections need to be made to the sort of the activity data in order for us to process a reimbursement. So we won't have if you say, oh no, it's actually this amount, we'll need that data in the system in order to process the invoice and then resubmit the invoice. In general, so as I talk about these things, again, like a service provider can be a hauler. It can also be a local government. It can be another operator, and so each of the so this can apply depending on what types of contract addendum you are expecting to sign. Then this can kind of will drive which reports you'll be able to upload, and then which invoices you can submit. Next one. So this one's a little simpler for invoice-only reimbursements. So these are going to be, again, the ones like a Pro Depot, agreement where, you're leasing space for that. And then, the contamination reduction or contamination management reimbursement, contamination reduction reimbursement, the $3 per capita, those kinds of things. Like you would just put together an invoice with the proper documentation. We'll review that, respond with any questions or requests or anything like that, making sure there's sort of all the documentation that's needed. And then once we approve, you'll be able to see that within the service provider portal, and then you'd get a payment within the next 60 days after that. So baseline data is going to be needed for especially the facilities, the CRPFs, and some of the transportation reimbursement ones. We're really going to be looking to populate our system with all of the data that you are currently working with, and so we understand sort of what is the current run rate within your MRF, sort of inbound and outbound material. We may want to know what sort of general equipment and things like that, so we understand the processes that are going on at the facilities. What kind of contamination rates you see, either from the MRF or from a community if they're measuring that as well, and each of the transportation segments that you'd likely be requesting funding for. And so we'll certainly have folks that can, kind of work with you through this process if you've got questions. But as you review the contract addenda, review the baseline data that's in one of the schedules at the end, and feel free to reach out. But that's review the requirements, submit them via email. to Oregon Info, and then we'll be able to, use that data to start to populate the baseline information into the system. And we'll certainly be able to reach out and respond with any questions as well once you start to submit that. But again, the actual, like exactly what that data is outlined in each of the contract addenda that's currently posted on the website. I think go to the next slide. Just racing through this. I think just to reiterate again, the most important thing is to download the primary funding agreement, the PFA, and any addenda, and start to review those. So those are on our website at circularaction.org/Oregon. You're going to want to sort of fill in the necessary information and the list of addenda, and you'll send those to our sort of legal partner in this, so CAA funding at millernash.com. And those will get sent there, reviewed by the legal team. And then once that process, so once you've got the PFA signed, then we can start to, kind of integrate you into our systems. So if there's any, then once you have those contracts signed, start to look at any of the baseline data that's going to be required, and submit that to CAA. Especially the CRPFs and others will need to submit that information before the end of June, so that we can have it ready and rolling in the system for launch on July 1st. We'll be, I think, kind of as I said, starting to roll out more information and training over the next month, and should be able to start getting folks into the system starting early in June. But make sure as this starts to go forward, make sure that any sort of automated emails that come from our system, if we sign you up as a user in our service provider portal, there isn't a registration process. It's just once you've got the contract signed, we'll get that information. There'll probably be like a vendor application form that we'll send you that will get the information, who are the users for the portal, or who's the billing contact and things like that. And so once we get that information, then you'll start to get, sort of an automated email. We'll sign you up in the system. You would get an email to set up an account. And so just want to make sure that as, sometimes those kind of automated emails can get rejected by spam filters and things like that. And so you may want to, work with your IT department to make sure any emails from circularaction.org we'll be able to get through. But if you have any issues, you're not seeing something after, then you can certainly reach out and ask questions. I haven't been monitoring the chat or any Q&A, so I'm not sure if there's a bunch of stuff that we should continue to dig into. But on the next webinar, we'll give you a little bit more of that information on the registration process. So getting from the contract signed to getting into the system. We'll also kind of give you a walkthrough of the portal. What does it look like, and what kind of things are you going to be able to do with it? We'll also be talking about the data templates that will be used, and that's something that I'm more than happy to dig in and discuss any further. And then also, another chance to ask questions and make sure you understand the overall process here. So thank you all very much for the time, and happy to answer questions. Susan or Alex, do you